Hello and welcome. Today we're reading A Saga of Tanya the Chansey by Unkillablemage, a fanfiction of Saga of Tanya the Evil, but in the world of Pokémon. Check the story if you like it, link in the description below, support the author if you can. Without further ado, let's start. Chapter 1. Hatch. Blinking as she slowly extracts herself into the cold air, Tanya becomes aware of herself once again. Blearily, disoriented by the sudden jump from the abyss and into existence, she tries to look around for clues to contextualize this impossible state. Because by any identifiable metric, Tanya Degurachev should be dead, gunned down over the ocean by that irritating fanatic in the defense of a Germanian convoy. As the moments tick on the familiar feeling of trying to move an unfamiliar body and the loud voices high overhead draw her to one conclusion. "Damn you, being X," she mutters, the normal fiery pillar of rage smothered from exhaustion. At the sound, the voices above her quiet, then some large hands scoop her up and start wiping her off with a towel, peeling something solid off the side of her head as they do. The comforting warmth of the towel is enough for Tanya to temporarily ignore the knowledge that these hands are too large, even for an infant's body. As her eyelids droop and flutter, blurry vision clears enough to see a woman with pink hair holding her up to a wide smile, then showing the tired bundle of towel to... Wait, what is that? The last thing Tanya sees before sleep claims her is some rotund pink creature reaching out to take the towel from the human. Damn you, being X. Once more, the career soldier confirms to herself, just one more try and she'll have it. Taking a few wobbly steps, Tanya once more overbalances her nearly spherical body and falls off her feet. Though fall is a bit of a stretch, roll is more accurate. Shaking her head, Tanya growls as much as she can with her new voice box, rocking back and forth to get up again. She's among the rest of the other happy that hatched, and isn't that a strange thought, in a large playpen in some kind of nursery room, tended mostly by adults of her new species called Chansey, and the human nurse that occasionally enters to perform checkups on her and the other infants. The fact that this is better than the orphanage in her old world says a lot about several things. The lie of being X's love chief of them all. But as humiliating as this is, being X was suspiciously absent for the majority of it. Even after Tanya lost to one of the false gods faithful, the creature himself didn't make an appearance to gloat. Instead, small, so small, enveloped on all sides by the sky itself, and chasing away the poisoned pyrite, the sky loves her. Oh, look at you! Good job! Crows the matron Chansey from across the room, chasing away a half-remembered dream. She waddles her egg-like body over and nudges Tanya with her foot, righting her. "Thank you, matron." Tanya stumbles out, her voice working alongside the body to undermine her. The matron squeals, and suddenly, everything's dark and warm. Tanya sighs as the matron rocks back and forth, the tiny former human wrapped in a firm yet soft hug. "You're so cute, my little battler," she cheers, voice muffled by blubber. Tanya allows the hug to last for around 10 seconds, until deciding it's gone on for long enough and starts to wiggle as much as her stubby limbs allow. The matron lets her down with a smile and head pat before waddling off. Battler, that word again. Pondering her situation, she carefully starts to shuffle forward, getting used to unfamiliar joints and proportions. Unless something strange happened while she was dead, this is neither of her old worlds, which means she's back to square one again, not even with the advantage of a human body. Thankfully, judging from the interactions between the Chansey and the humans, she's neither food nor a pet, instead some strange sort of near equal. The nurses give complex instructions to the Chansey and respect their input, despite a lack of common language. Chansey who are themselves quite intelligent from observed conversations. For some reason, they seem not to be able to speak Japanese, despite being able to understand it perfectly. Tanya was quite surprised to hear her mother tongue once more after so long. She'd not heard or spoken Japanese in over a decade, and to her embarrassment, she was more than a little rusty. She hadn't even noticed that they were speaking the language until a few days ago, but it's becoming more and more clear there's something special to her new species. Every time Tanya demonstrates physical or mental acuity, the most common compliment from the caretakers is battler, implying the highest calling of a Chansey is to become a battler, whatever that means. Shuffled steps become more natural as fellow penmates rock back and forth, still struggling to find their feet. As her young muscles start to burn from exertion, Tanya continues to watch and learn. Learn about this new world and her place inside it. It's unlikely she'll be able to be a salaryman here, and there's no talk of some great war. But success, to excel, is something she's spent so much of her life seeking that the path to it is almost preternaturally easy to find. But for once, she's not planning on following it. She could make up excuses, claim that as long as she's under the thumb of being X, there's no chance of getting high enough to take advantage of her work, but that's not the real reason. The truth is quite simple. Tanya just got off the front lines of one of the most bloody and pointless wars to have ever been fought, pushed to risk her life over and over against increasingly impossible odds. It doesn't take a genius to intuit that a battler would mean throwing herself back into what took death to escape, and she's tired. One foot trips another, and her new body makes a squeak as she falls over, again. But this time, the matron's giggling turns into squealing cheers as Tanya manages to rise to her feet herself. Unfortunately, that success is undermined by another Chansey picking her up from behind and giving a twirling hug. "You're just too much, you little cutie," cheers the Chansey in a purple nurse's hat as she squeezes Tanya. "Such a strong little Happini deserves a treat." At this, she finds herself carried over the wall of the pen and towards a fold-out table on the far side of the room. With her new height, she notes that on the table there's a plate covered in some form of pink pastry. Seeing proof that this newest indignity has a reward at the end, her faint struggles fade. Plus, it's nearly nap time. Grabbing the offered pastry, she takes a bite and gives an involuntary chirp and warble. Delicious. Nibbling on a pastry nearly the size of her head, with a sleepy blink, Tanya de Gurshev watches. She plans. And she waits. Rocking the sleepy hatchling as she nods off, Chansey has to avoid waking her by cooing at the most adorable sight of her charge's messy face, struggling to stay awake and keep eating her Pokepuff. Though another, even cuter reason for Chansey's silence is how indignant this little Happini gets whenever anyone calls attention to how adorable she is. Quite the sweet tooth as well. Despite the puff being almost half her size, she'd managed to make quite the dent, which of course only makes her even more cute. Chansey's self-control shatters as the Happini's face contorts into a scowl just before she fails fighting back a big yawn, releasing a soft squeal which has little eyes lock onto hers with disapproval. It's pretty rare to see a Happini with such a big personality so early, though it really shouldn't surprise her that this hatchling is the first to be walking around. With opinions that loud, there's no way this little girl would let something as simple as her body's limits stop her. She looks towards the rest of the sleeping hatchlings with a smile. It's rare that a mon of her evolution line has that fire. The fire to push their body's limits against an impossible challenge and, win or lose, grow stronger by the experience. Not just the willingness, not just the desire, but the need to fight. Arceus knows she doesn't have it, but one doesn't spend as much time around hatchlings as Chansey has and not get a feel for the telltale signs. Reaching over to take the leftovers of the Pokepuff, sleepy eyes snap from the edge of dreams to bleary alertness, grabbing onto her treat with indignation. Unfortunately for this little fighter, nap time started 10 minutes ago, and Chansey's been assigned to the nursery far too long for a stubborn hatchling to be trouble. Drawing on wisps of power from the wellspring within, a simple humming melody is imbued with the barest suggestion of sleep, just enough to tip her charge over the edge she's been teetering on. A delicate trick. At this age, it's not good to mess with their auras too much. The human nurses say hatchlings shouldn't even be allowed to watch high-level battles for the first few years while their auras stabilize. Personally, Chansey doesn't see the harm in it. When she was a Happini, the nursery was in the same building as the local gym. But humans, even her fellow nurses, have always been silly, so she humors them. As little eyes droop, the Happini's hands tighten on the puff and her frown becomes more severe somehow. But soon enough, both their face and grip slackens, allowing Chansey to take the treat and place it on the table. She'll give it back after she wakes up.
Stepping over the playpen walls, she places the Happini among her batchmates. Moving towards the door, Chansey spares one last glance before heading off to the innumerable other duties in the Joy compound. She remembers the last time a mon of her line had that fire. Hyper beam cracking the ground as it crosses the distance, the air sizzling with nothing but proximity. Hits braced pink flesh and stops. Chansey smiles. It's always a shame whenever the Happini evolve and have to leave for their postings in far-flung Poke Centers, meeting perhaps once or twice more years later at some reunion of similar function. But if her hunch is right, Chansey opens the door with the special lower handles and leaves the nursery. To see how that one's doing, she'll just have to turn on the TV.
Chapter 2. Playtime. It only took a few weeks for Tanya's batchmates to be up and waddling around, a rather surprising development in all honesty. Admittedly, the former soldier didn't have a frame of reference for how fast Happini should develop, but now where there was once a field of pink bloms lying on the soft floor, her fellow Happini are now up and moving about. Thankfully, the Happini are significantly less noisy than human children, allowing Tanya to coexist in their walled pen with them with little issue. In fact, their new energy has caused the caretakers to add lots of new enrichment tools to help them burn off excess energy. Since last week, buckets full of brightly colored plastic and soft, rounded toys have been delivered by the human nurse and big tubs. Of course, as Tanya has the mind of an adult human, so the items aren't very useful for their intended purpose, but... "Excuse me," asks a voice from behind, causing Tanya to turn and look at her sister. She's about half a centimeter shorter and a quarter shade darker pink. She doesn't have a name beyond a subtle distinction of tone and inflection, but for some reason, Tanya can remember those subtle distinctions with near-perfect clarity.
The slightly pinker Happini is holding out an off-white plastic ball, the most popular kind of toy in the entire playpen. "Do you want to hold it?" she asks sweetly, pushing the item closer. Not wanting to be rude, Tanya takes the offered toy and places it in her pouch with a nod. "Thank you," her batchmate nods. After a moment, the other Happini glances down at the toy, so Tanya pulls it out again. "Do you want it back?" She nods, taking the egg-shaped toy and waddling away. Tanya watches her with amused eyes as she bumps into another Happini, and after they both get up, she repeats the procedure. Case in point. Their favorite game is sharing. Sometimes they spend the better part of an hour just standing around in groups, passing beige plastic around. The thought of the orphan kids back in Germania doing anything even remotely similar is foreign to the point of comedy. Shaking her head to refocus on exercise, Tanya grabs a hold of the ladder and starts the slow process of climbing it once again, struggling against both gravity and unfamiliar proportions. With a completely foreign body, she's actually at a disadvantage against her batchmates, forced to unlearn muscle memory to regain her former dexterity. Although there is a certain sense of pride as she reaches the top of the ladder and pulls herself to stand on the peak, the lack of burning muscles proof of her increased strength. The plastic slide she's standing on would be tiny to a normal human, even a child, but the toy appears to be specially designed for her species, and Tanya has found it to be incredibly useful as a piece of impromptu exercise equipment. While not something she deliberately sought out, military life gave her a certain level of physical fitness that was a shame to have lost. Turning around and sitting down, Tanya pushes off the walls of the slide opposite to the ladder and rides the brightly colored plastic down, her body making that strange chirping warble as she does, another quirk of the new form. She fails at sticking the landing, tumbling on the dismount and crashing into another sister, toppling her. But as they both get up, she notices the matrons trying to get everyone's attention, a process that involves a lot of hopping from foot to foot, flapping arms and repeating, "Hello!" The former drill sergeant within Tanya rankles at the matron's lack of conviction, for not demanding their attention with noise and anger. The children at the orphanage in Germania would eat her alive, possibly literally, considering the suspicious nature of some of the stews in the harder winters, accompanied by the disappearance of stray dogs. Thankfully, this group is more than willing to direct their attention to her weak display, sounds of play going quiet and every eye trained on her. But even after the matron had everyone's attention, she didn't notice until after a few more seconds before looking around at all the staring eyes, surprised, then overjoyed. "Oh my gosh, thank you all so much," she cheers, dancing on the spot. "You all did such a good job paying attention." At the matron's words, the happening all give wide smiles and little cheers, rocking back and forth in pleasure. A fact that causes no small amount of amusement with Tanya herself at how easy her siblings are to please. "You've all grown up so much and been so good, and I thought it's time for a special treat for big girls." She pauses for effect with a playful smile, then resuming with a great deal of waving arms, "We're going outside to play." There's a confused pause, then some muted celebration, but mostly still confusion, which makes sense, Tanya realizes with a blink. Aside from her, none of her batchmates have ever been outside. The matron, undeterred, starts describing how amazing outside is and all the wonderful things they can do. As she does, she beckons at the door and it opens, letting in the human nurse, the only human Tanya's seen since she'd hatched. "And as long as you tell a nurse first, you can get into the lake for a swim, and you'll be able to make new friends. It'll be great." The matron finishes extolling the virtues of the outdoors in an almost breathless rush. Waddling over, she opens the playpen gates and points at the human. "This is Nurse Joy, my partner." She looks up and wiggles her arm. "Say hello, Nurse Joy." There's a cautious silence as the Hapini stare at the human, wavering on what to do. Seeing this, the nurse crouches down and gives a small wave. "Hello there," she says with a soft smile. "My name's Nurse Joy, but you all can call me Zoe." Her batchmates are still hesitant, but the matron's breathless description of the outdoors has piqued Tanya's interest, so she decides to hurry the process along a bit. Brushing off a strange hesitancy, she walks over to the nurse and, grabbing a hand with both of hers, gives a professional shake with a small bow. Shallower than she'd intended, but in her defense, she's a bit rusty at Japanese-style introductions. The nurse blinks, then gives Tanya a giggle and head pat. Thankfully, it broke the tension, the rest of her sisters beginning to crowd around and either giving a wave or, to her amused pride, imitating Tanya's handshake. With introductions done in no time, everyone's corralled into a line. Nurse Joy leading the Hapini procession while the caretakers walk alongside and the matron takes up the rear. A completely necessary precaution, it seems, to stop distracted Hapini from wandering off as they navigate a maze of unfamiliar corridors. But after just about a minute of walking, their group is interrupted by a voice from a side hall. "Zoe, you lucky houndoom," shouts a voice as the line comes to a stop. Nurse Joy turning to speak to Nurse Joy? As the Zoe answers with a sigh, Tanya looks carefully at her. Female, pink hair done in loops, roughly 5 feet 9 inches in height, wearing a well-pressed nurse's outfit. Tanya looks to the new individual. Female, pink hair done in a braid, roughly 5 feet 9 inches in height, wearing a well-pressed nurse's uniform. What? Glancing down at her dumbfounded expression, the newcomer bursts out laughing and gestures at Tanya with her hand before both look down with wide smiles. After another moment, Zoe reaches down and pats her head again as the other leaves with the wave. With that, the procession resumes, but the implications of what she'd seen remain. Perhaps her new form is the product of scientific experimentation after all, considering it seems that human gene editing and cloning has been perfected. In all honesty, it's rather embarrassing that she didn't pick up on it sooner. Pink hair is not normal for humans, especially a bright pink that just so happens to almost perfectly match the color of her own fuzz. But as a pair of double doors open and the group steps, blinking into the sun, Tanya's train of thought is completely disrupted by the scene in front of them. With her size being what it is, the career soldier's sense of scale is completely shot, but the clearing they've entered is large. A grassy field with carefully groomed trees and bushes scattered about surrounding a moderately sized pond with a small water fountain as a centerpiece.
Instead of fences, the entire clearing is boxed in by the building they just exited. To protect against flying predators, a massive stretch of bird netting spans between the buildings and freestanding metal poles. The crisscross bubbing creates a dappled shadow on the entire scene. There are other creatures here too, animals she'd never seen in every color of the rainbow. They're everywhere, playing with each other or just lazing in the sun or the shade of a tree. Looking around, Tanya hadn't realized how cooped up she was feeling. Taking a deep breath, she closes her eyes to savor the moment. All right, everyone, we're here. If you want to go back in early, just ask a nurse, and don't forget to have fun, waves the matron as she subtly encourages a few of the stragglers to step off the linoleum and onto the grass. At her words, Tanya's batchmates start to waddle away in every direction. Not wanting to seem unusual, the former soldier follows suit, looking for a nice place to sit as she wanders. Because as inoffensive as her cis batchmates are, she genuinely cannot remember the last time she was alone. Certainly not in this life. But the bunking situation on the Germanian convoy in her fatal mission was crowded as well. Even on land campaigns, when space is in abundance, she genuinely cannot recall a time she wasn't with someone. Glancing around as she comes to a stop, Tanya sits down and lays back in the grass, then takes a deep breath as she gazes up at the sky through protective netting. She did it. After so long. There's nothing to do, no emergency to plan for or subordinate to manage. Right now, she's more free than even her most outlandish fantasies of a rear position in Germania, every need cared for, and no expectations or danger. She's in an even better position than in her increasingly hazy memories as a salaryman so long ago. But as she closes her eyes and takes a breath, the sense of ease she'd been expecting is slow to come. Scrunching her face, Tanya takes another breath to try and ease the growing feeling of something. A feeling that's surely a holdover from her previous life, pushing against this relaxed behavior. Something that's telling her to get up and, what are you doing? Opening her eyes with a scowl, she pushes herself up to glare at the interruption. At her gaze, a group of 3 flinches back. The creatures are unique. 2 orange baby chicks and a baby blue quadrupedal fish type thing. Relaxing, Tanya states with restrained anger, and enjoying some peace and quiet. Oh, the largest orange chicken rallies, ruffling his feathers. There's a pause. I'm Torchic, he states before pointing at his compatriots with a leg. That's Mudkip, and he's Torchic. Tanya sighs as she nods, mind filing away the subtle difference in the inflection marking their names. Can I help you? She asks. There's another pause, accompanied by some shuffling. What's your name? Did you fall over? Asks the second Torchic and the Mudkip, respectively. Tanya sighs. Apparently the interruption to her relaxation isn't going away. Tanya. And no, I did not. The leader puffs himself up indignantly, as if she just insulted him. Yes, you did. Hapini are always falling over. They're lazy, he states with the surety of a universal truth. Tanya blinks. Lazy? The chicken nods. Apparently, she'd said her thoughts out loud. Yeah, lazy and weak. Standing up, Tanya sets down a rock she'd picked up on the walk over and takes a step closer. You think I'm weak? She asks calmly, sure this chicken doesn't even know her, but to assume that she's weak. The other 2 seem to have recognized their leader's social faux pas, taking a step away as she approaches. The target of her attention doesn't notice, tilting his head, almost confused. Hapini are weak? He almost asks. That's why they become nurses. Lifting a leg, he wiggles his claws before shaping them into a threatening-looking crescent. I'm a battler. I even learned a move already. He puffs his feathers in pride and wobbles as it disrupts his one-legged stance. I'm gonna get a trainer soon and get stronger. Weak? Prove it.
The Torchic blinks, half lowering his foot in confusion. What?
Tanya takes a step back and widens her stance. You believe I'm weaker than you? Prove it. She states, eyes flicking over her opponent, scanning for weakness. It's clear that this trumped-up chicken has come to take advantage of a perceived inferiority, lording his status as king of the playground over her and won't leave until he's satisfied. Therefore, it's wholly logical to disprove the incorrect notion. If Tanya proves herself to be a credible threat, the schoolyard bully will leave her alone, a classic method of establishing hierarchy back at the orphanage. The Torchic seems confused, glancing back at his compatriots before an expression of angry realization crosses his face. Hey, you're trying to get me in trouble. You'll just go crying to the He starts, but Tanya cuts him off. I thought you were a battler, not a coward, she goads, evoking a gasp from the peanut gallery. The Torchic chirps indignantly and scrapes a claw on the grass. Oh, it's on, he shouts, the air almost wavering with the force of his anger. No, hold on. It is. Her opponent moves, crossing the distance between them in a single leap and bringing a taloned claw high. Crush claw. Hey! Torchic squawks as Tanya dodges the mid-air attack by the barest of margins. Turning to track the opponent as he passes by, her mind scrambles to come up with a solution. She'd not realized how much extra mass her new body has, slowing every movement and leadening every limb. The attack should have been child's play to dodge, but as it stands, she barely avoided it on instinct alone. Torchic tumbles as he lands before rising with an impressive growl. Rushing across the distance again, he sends out a flurry of pecks that has Tanya backstepping to avoid, before he commits with a leap and connects. Bracing for the sharp beak, Tanya almost blinks as the attack lands, and it's not that bad. Sure, it hurts a bit, but she's felt far worse. Suddenly, the illusion is broken, and Tanya realizes that she's fighting a child, not a human child, but a child nonetheless. She'd been subconsciously expecting an inexperienced, sloppy soldier, not a schoolyard scap. She almost laughs at how ridiculous the entire situation is, giving a wide smile as the Torchic jumps back. When her opponent looks up, he falters for a second before shaking his head and jumping back in with a yell mirroring his first strike. Watching the leg approach, Tanya does something unusual. Instead of moving out of his range, she moves in. The leg connects this time, but instead of on the claw, it hits with the leg, sapping the move of most its leverage. Reaching up, Tanya grabs the leg and tries to pull her opponent to the ground. Unfortunately, the force of the strike pushed her off balance, so the attempt sends them both into the grass. From there, things got significantly less coherent. What she does know is that when two Chansey pull them apart, they're both scuffed, stained by dirt and grass, and there's a scratch gently oozing blood on the side of Tanya's head. But the Torchic looks significantly worse off, battered and missing clumps of feathers, with one eye already swelling shut. He gives one last half-hearted attempt to close the gap and continue the fight before he falls unconscious. Feeling some kind of soothing sensation pour over her while the Chansey do something, Tanya's own eyes start to droop and her consciousness fades. There's just one thought accompanied by a sense of singular fulfillment before she passes out completely. I win. You're in the Silver Library. If you enjoyed the experience, like and subscribe. See you in the next video.